Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic, famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere, nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader, like that car right in your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to a very special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew, as always. That's absolutely everything you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast, though, well, it's given away by the title. I'm here to talk of the stories of films, and I tend to talk about development stories, production stories, marketing stories, release stories, all the ingredients, really, that go towards making the films that we know and sometimes love. Just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. The films I tend to cover on this podcast, they lean more towards the mainstream than anything else. They're films I'm interested in or invested in to some degree. I try really hard not to do snark. I try really hard not to punch down. This podcast is a celebration of cinema and a real appreciation that somehow, films manage to get made. This particular episode is one of my occasional special episodes of Film Stories where I bring in a filmmaker to talk about their latest release and stroke or their body of work. You get a little bit of both in this particular episode because I'm delighted to be joined by director James Watkins. Now, he's here primarily to talk about his new movie, Speak No Evil, which is playing in cinemas around the world now. We also touch on his debut feature, Eden Lake. He directed The Woman in Black, so that pops up during conversation at one point. Also, the film Rolling Thunder, and also the ZX Spectrum version of Rolling Thunder. If you're an 80s computer game nerd here in the UK, you might get more out of that than I think James Watkins did when I asked him that. But I mean, this was a really fun chat to do, a really enjoyable chat. It kicks off with me talking to him about Jon Harris, who the editor on lots and lots of his films. Harris also directed The Descent Part 2, and James Watkins came in to do work on that for him. So that's clearly a core friendship. It's a place where the conversation kicks off, and you'll hear it all after this clip.
This is my husband, Ben.
Patrick Feld, this is my wife, Kira.
This is Agnes.
Has some trouble communicating. He can be a bit insecure.
Nice Vespa. Yeah, isn't she? You should try.
Can we?
I won't call the fun police if you don't.
Okay.
Io lo so che mi chiami anche da diversi fusi orari. Ieri siamo stati esagerati.
Back before I quit my practice. You're a lawyer. Doctor, listen, you have to come and visit. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah? Yeah. Done.
It's so quiet around here. Don't even have any neighbors.
Hey, you made it!
Welcome.
Ta-da!
You are VIP guests.
Just to remind you, I'm a vegetarian.
Our gift to you.
That is so...
Louise, doctor's orders.
Very good.
Settle in. I promise you guys, it could be a great weekend.
How long's it been?
17 years.
17 years.
Wow.
You get less for murder.
Something's not right with him.
He has a condition. It makes it hard for him to communicate.
Sometimes it's okay to think things, but you can't actually say them. Oh, no.
Thank God there's a doctor in the house.
I'm not a doctor.
What?
That was a clip from the trailer for Speak No Evil. I'm delighted to be joined by the person who adapted it and the person who directed it. It's James Watkins, who's in front of some very flowery looking wallpaper there. James Watkins, how are you? Are you well?
I'm pretty good, thank you. Yeah.
Well, I mean, welcome to the Film Stories podcast. There's
Thank
only
you.
one logical place for me to start, and that's with Jon Harris. Really, I thought I'd go straight in there because I first encountered you when I was back in my Den of Geek days. I remember Eden Lake coming in, and I'll come to that shortly. But what was interesting, because I'm also a reader of credits. I'm quite a boring old nerd these days, and the name Jon Harris keeps popping up, and of course you've popped up in his work as well. Can you just? I know it's just like a small nerdy question, but what's special about this relationship between the two of you? Because there's presumably a lot of trust between.
A lot of trust. We're good friends, I think I could say.
Would he say that? Would he say you're mortal enemies?
He would probably say something different, but in jest. I'm very lucky to be working with Jon from my first film that I made. He is a world-class editor. Wouldn't embarrass him, but one of the best around. It's not a coincidence that Matthew Vaughn, he's doing Danny Boyle's movie at the moment. He's done several movies with Danny. He's brilliant. And the key relationship probably that you have on a movie is with your editor.
Yeah.
He's cut every movie I've ever shot, and they're all the much better for it.
So how did the two of you find each other then? Because Eden Lake was your first film as director, but wasn't his first film as editor.
Jon was pretty senior then. So a guy called Christian Coulson, producer, who produced Eden Lake, and roughly at the same time produced Slumdog Millionaire, for which he won an Oscar. Christian had done Descent, I think, with Jon, and so they knew each other. And Christian put us together, and so it was like I had I was having like I was like a third division football team that had a star striker coming in, So I was very lucky, and we just got on, and we see story. We talk a lot about films. We watch a lot of films, and we see filmmaking in the same way. It's a real partnership. It's a real conversation in the edit, and a real rigor and ruthlessness about how we do it, how we approach shaping. I mean, Jon does the hard work. I just come in and give him some thoughts. But it's a brilliant partnership, and long may it continue, because he's a great guy and most amazing editor.
One of the things I do on this podcast is I tell the stories of an assortment of films, and I've covered about 400 or 500 films. The number of times a director's fired the editor, or it's just not worked out. It's just quite interesting that you see it with certain directors, certain editors, that there's just such a bond. That's why I wanted to kind of go into that a little bit.
I mean, it's all about story. The best editors are storytellers, I think, and they understand. There are editors who cut because they think there's a musicality or a rhythm or whatever. Now, great editors can do that. Jon can do that as well, and there is a real elegance to the way he cuts. But it's story led, and he won't make a cut without a motivation for the cut. There's people that just do things because they think it's sexy, or they think it's going to look, and it's just, we call it, or they chop stuff up. Jon and I call it coleslaw, where they just kind of chop up the edit to try and make it, jumpy, and there's so many misunderstandings about the edit, about how, if you cut, often producers come in, or execs, and they go, can we just speed it up? There's a complete misunderstanding about pace in film. Speeding things up does not make things feel faster. It can make things feel slower. Pace is about an audience being in the moment of each beat, and each beat then escalating to the next beat. If you read any of the best work from Aristotle to David Mamet, they will tell you that. And it's really hard to, on this film, where there's a slow burn escalation of tension, and we wanted to play it as slow as possible. We threw out there were some scenes that I absolutely loved, but we're quite ruthless about going, go, go, go. And then when I talked to John about it, he's like, yeah, I've worked with, I won't mention any names, but he's worked with people in the past who've really held on to stuff. Oh, I love it. I love that moment, or I love that shot. And I think John and I are quite honest. It's like, he doesn't come to the film set because it's like, he doesn't give a crap that, this shot on a crane might have taken me 15 hours. It's irrelevant. The audience doesn't know. They don't care. And he's right. And so it's that, we have a very kind of benign ruthlessness in the edit.
Benign ruthlessness. That's a great phrase.
It's a real pleasure. And often the edit, you get 10 weeks often before you show the movie to anyone. It's really special time, and you're finding the movie, and and it's great when the film is working and it's fraught, not between us, but when a film's not working, less, sometimes people, they come after the composer first off, and often they come after the editor.
Interesting.
And because they often can't fire or don't want to fire the director, and they go, let's get someone else in.
I hadn't thought about the composer is right at the front so many times, right?
Composer is so often in the firing line because they go, oh, it's the music, because it's so often about pace, and it's most people, a lot of film execs don't understand, a lot of smart ones do, but it's I don't know,
it's quite hard for me to talk about Speak No Evil without spoiling it. I'm really quite regimented on not wanting to spoil, so I'm going to tiptoe really lightly. And if I can, I'll approach it this way: that one of the things that struck me about Eden Lake is, in the nicest sense, you're a lingerer, that you've got the courage to hold a shot for a long time. Where, as you were saying just before, the temptation a lot of the time is we've got to cut away, and you hold like 3 seconds beyond my level of comfort, and I start to feel complicit even in the event. In the case of Speak No Evil, God, how do I do this? One of the things that really surprised me was how late in the day you kind of started to, let's just say, mildly alter things, that you held the tone of it and a lot of the uncertainty and the mystery for, I don't have a running time bar of when the film starts.
Sure.
But I would imagine it's right down near the end. Most of that progress bar would have gone and there's just a little bit left. Only then do you start to let me in on it a bit. There strikes me as a creative courage in this, and I'm conscious that it's based on a previous film, but in a traditional studio Hollywood environment, I would expect someone to be saying, no, about 10 minutes earlier, you've got to start letting fireworks off and things like that. So can you take me into this a bit?
Yeah, very much. It was fascinating because, we tried to, John's first assemblies are pretty tight, and we deliberately wanted to make it tight because we knew it was slow burn, and we didn't, sometimes if, some people shamelessly put in ridiculously baggy first assemblies, like 2.5, 3, 4, and you're just like, why are you bothering? Why are you showing this? The film, how can people judge it? They're going to say it's slow and boring. So give them something. It's baffling, right? I mean, the amount of times you can see a movie and you can go, well, we could have probably lost 45 minutes of that in an afternoon, and so, so it's that sense of, so it's that kind of feeling of tightness. But with this, we wanted it to be slow burn. I have to give a lot of credit to Blumhouse and here, because, for example, when we first showed it to Blumhouse, John and I put on some kind of slightly more genre-y music than would have been to our taste. And I remember speaking to Cooper Samuelson at Blumhouse, and he said to me, he goes, I love the cut, but what's that music? And we were like, well, we did it for you because you guys are American, you're a bit more is more, and you guys, and he's like, James, don't insult me here, like, don't we know each other properly, and
that's a great tactic, isn't it? But
it was brilliant. Well, it was brilliant because it was actually, I've been in that situation with American execs where they kind of, the note is, it's like Faster and Funnier. It's literally like, can we get a jump scare in here? Can we do that? And that was never the conversation with Blumhouse. It was always, oh, what's the scene about? What's the moment? What's the escalation? Are we with the characters? And it was always John, and that was our guiding theory, was that you know, this film, it's not about jump scare. It's not that sort of movie. It's about, is it relatable? Can you put yourselves in the shoes of these characters and understand the situation and the horror of everyday life? And if you do that, you know, can you just slowly start, you know, boiling the frog, you know, boiling the water that the frog's in? And it's that. So that's kind of how we approached it. There was a lot of calibration. There's a lot of scenes that have been cut. Not a lot, but probably, let's say 3 or 4 scenes that I absolutely love, but we were just junked. Junk it, John, junk it, you know, and they were really, really well played, well acted, and good scenes. But what they didn't do was they kind of were doing the same thing but different as some of the other scenes in the film. So you didn't feel this slow glide. You sort of, it's weirdly, you kind of, it's very hard to quantify, but John and I call it referred pain. You're watching it and people might enjoy the scene, but like 10 minutes later, they're getting a bit, you know, itchy feet and a bit fidgety. Yeah. And you realize it's because there's something in the human brain, I think, that it's that slow burn and build. And story brain, people are attuned to knowing when a story is not moving forward. And then their unconscious brain gets bored. And so you kind of always have to go, okay, is this additive? Is it escalatory? And it creates quite a ruthlessness in terms of story structure. So you can sort of let scenes play, the mise en scène, you can let it flow, but you have to have the structure be really ruthless.
But in that instance where the problem's 10 minutes like further in the film, that I as an audience member am getting itchy feet or whatever, just hypothetically speaking, how do you find the root of that? Why do you know that it's those scenes if it's not a specific moment?
It's kind of, I mean, slightly trial and error and guesswork. I mean, you just kind of sense it. You go, okay, there's a problem here. And then you're looking at the problem and then you realize the problem isn't always the problem. Yeah. You know, because you're watching this and you're going, what? Okay, what is it about this scene? And then you go, okay, so I can sense it. And then you realize it may have come before that point. And then, so yeah, I don't know, it's a smell, you know, and the more you do it, the more you pick it up. I don't know, it's very hard to say, but I sort of feel you know, John and I believe a lot in testing. And I know testing can be a dirty word, but it's not testing that's the problem. It's how tests are misinterpreted sometimes, you know, or scores, you know, because, you know, often they just want to, you know, what's your score? You know, what's your def rec or whatever they call it, you know, and
your def rec.
Yeah, they have the boxes, top 2 boxes they call it. And and one of them is excellent, whatever, and then they have def recs, which is definitely recommend. You know, how many? Are you 75 def rec or whatever? You know, and it's all.
See, I interviewed you in 2009, and you'd have never have used the phrase def rec. You've changed.
You see, I have. Well, I've become a little bit more, you know, battle hardened, I think is the word.
I get that. I get that.
So, you know.
One of the things about Eden Lake, just going back there, is it someone who knew what an audience for that film was expecting? That was one of the things that really took me about that. And so you could kind of push against it a little bit or know when to subvert. And I got 2 parallels with Speak No Evil. Number one is Roland Emmerich's White House Down. An unusual parallel, but I mean, that's a proper, hugely enjoyable popcorn flick. I think I've a blast with that. But the first half hour of that film is a guided tour, and like everything, every object you see in the first 30 minutes is going to be used later in the film. Every single one. And in your case, I'm watching your film and thinking, I as the audience member, I'm expecting you to use everything you lay down, and then you don't. So that's number one that kind of wrong foots me a little bit. The other is I spoke to Jeff Wadlow earlier in the year with another Blumhouse film, Imaginary, and he talked about the conventional Blumhouse movie is a house or a contained location with some people just put in the middle of it, and the film plays out from there. And even then, you're sort of playing slightly within that sandbox, but cheating by then having 3 very, very distinct locations. And I'm just curious, when you're writing this, even before you've got onto a set, how much along the road of the unwritten rules are you going? And do you have a point where you think, hang on, right, I've got that far, so now I'm going to do something just to push it the other way?
I mean, not consciously. I tried to write within. I mean, obviously, I had quite a roadmap with this film because of Christian's movie, but
of course,
I try to write. I try not to think about kind of external stuff. I try to just to think within the story of the characters and how they react. I think you can trip yourself up too much if you sort of try and get too sort of meta about it all. I kind of go, okay, I've got the truer and more specific you can be to the characters. That's one reason why I really wanted the film set in the UK.
Yeah.
And that was a conversation I had with Blumhouse at the outset. I said, listen, I think I can do this. I think I can do something interesting and make a little bit of my own of it if I can set it in the UK, because then there's a specificity in terms of world, character, humor, point of view, whatever, that I can bring to it. If it's set in, West Virginia, I don't know that world. I don't know. Yeah, so I don't know that world. So so I'm always trying to just be as specific. I guess the more I've done it, I'm trying to lean more into the specific.
Yeah.
And trying to do stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not like in terms of following genre or stuff like that. You can, I mean, look, I think that people do that, but it's not really my method.
I just get a sense you watch a lot of films.
I do, I like a lot of, I mean, it's like if you do what I do and you don't watch films, why are you doing what I do? It's
people do,
yeah, but it's I mean, I love films. In fact, when you were talking about White House Down, I was thinking about, weirdly, I don't know why it came into my head, Rolling Thunder. And the first half
was
hour
a great arcade game, though. The ZX Spectrum version was terrific.
I don't know the arcade. I don't know anything about games, but it's a Paul Schrader movie with
I remember
that he wrote in the 70s, and the first half hour is very, very kind of, you're watching it, and it's really interesting character for this guy that comes back from a prisoner of war camp in Vietnam, and then suddenly about half an hour in, it kicks in with this incredibly brutal sort of scene that kicks off the movie. And again, it's that thing. It's like, I don't know how it relates to what I've been doing, but it's I don't know. I sort of feel we're setting up a world, and you kind of, like what you said, there's an expectation.
Yeah.
Going into this film, whatever, advertising, branding, whatever, something's going to happen.
Yes.
So it's the old what's his name, William Goldman thing. Make them wait. It's going to happen. That Paddy, something's up. Yeah. There's an inherent kind of queasiness underneath it. So you don't need to over egg it, I think. You kind of go, it's actually sometimes, the journey's sometimes more interesting than the destination.
So on the something's up point, putting your film aside just for a second, the most underrated Blumhouse movie for me is Joel Edgerton's The Gift, where the tension for that goes absolutely off the chart. Absolutely off the chart. And what I think's interesting there, because tension runs through so many of your films, but as a colleague pointed out to me, and I didn't see it when I watched the film because I was ripping the armrests off, Joel Edgerton never released the tension at any point. There's no popping of the balloon throughout that. And I've read something that you've gone a slightly different way with this. This is my spoiler-free way of attacking the question. But you've done something I read in Speak No Evil called Red Light, Green Light. That I don't think the tension ever comes out of what's going on in your film, but you approach it in a slightly different way. Can you tell me in as spoiler-free a way as possible what you're going for with Red Light, Green Light?
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's a sense in which, Ben and Louise, this sort of hero couple, and they go and visit their new friends, Paddy and Kira, and Louise is slightly not less convinced than Ben and slightly unsettled by being there. And, there's a sort of series of escalating microaggressions, I would say, from Paddy. And Louise is getting more and more uncomfortable. But the thing is, for every time they're uncomfortable, there's a value negative thing. There's kind of a corresponding value positive thing. Paddy is, he takes them to a great spot. He's brilliant at foraging. He lights a great fire. He has fun. He makes his whatever Calvados. Well, there's lots of stuff there so it's this constant sense in which you're both the central characters and the audience are kind of constantly wrong-footed, I suppose, as to sort of go, okay, well, is this good? That's not bad. That's kind of, oh, well, that's, and so it's that sense of constantly keeping you, off balance. So, yeah, but I also think, lots of the humor in the film, and I think I've sat in audiences and it's deliberately, and I think it works in a humorous way, that it sometimes humor diffuses tension, but here humor is kind of the other side of the coin of the horror, because it's the cringe. So it's, even though it's humorous, it's not necessarily letting the air out the bag, so whereas sometimes it would.
Let me bring in then Barry Norman's review of The Fugitive on Film 93, where he made a really, I've thought about this so much over the years. He made a really interesting point about casting with The Fugitive, because his review, I'm paraphrasing him, was he loves the film. It would be even more interesting if Tommy Lee Jones and Harrison Ford swapped roles, because all of a sudden you've got a bit more ambiguity. It struck me with your film that the casting of this is really clever, because I know James McAvoy's getting a lot of the press, but you look at Mackenzie Davis, Scoot McNairy, what they're doing with this. You could have inverted these couples, and it's not quite as clean cut as it first appears, I think. Can you take me into casting couples, especially when you've got, well, you're effectively casting two families, aren't you, side by side? And still giving me just like that uncertainty, really, of who's on whose side.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you're casting a couple, you're casting a family. So it's so you kind of, so I started with James, and when I was writing the script, and I was talking with Jon Harris about this, and John's cut a lot of movies with James.
Well, he did
McAvoy
Starter for 10, didn't he, with James? And James McAvoy is a delightful lead in that. Utterly lovable. I mean, take him home.
I think he did one of the X-Men. I think he did he did Trance. I think he's done 3 or 4 movies with James in, and he's, so I said, look, it's got to be McAvoy. Or John said, I can't remember which one said it, but we had this conversation. It's like, so we went to James, and fortunately he said yes, which is incredibly unusual that the first person you take it to says yes. And he was, and I sat down with James and we saw the film the same way, and that was great. So then you kind of go, okay, so now I need to work out the prism of this. And then, so it was like, okay, I think we went, I can't remember whether we've got, well, I was a big fan of Scoot, but also I quite like, I like Scoot's kind of minimalism in his acting. And I knew that James's character, Paddy, is quite performative. So he's going to kind of go there, he has to, and Peacock. And so the idea of this tension with Scoot, who underplays everything, I knew that McAvoy is such a brilliant actor, and Scoot, and I could see, it was brilliant on set, because both of them are savvy enough to know they need to be in the same movie, right? And so there's an instant tension between them, how they interact in acting, and so, but also Scoot, I just thought was so right for playing this kind of superannuated guy who feels a bit on the scrap heap, and the sense of kind of, sadness with his life or whatever it is, or frustration or whatever. So, and then I'd seen Halt and Catch Fire, but I don't know, I blanked it. I couldn't remember that they were both in it. Anyway, so I went, but then that was a kind of happy accident. And I'm a big fan of Mackenzie's, and Mackenzie's just really kind of got an intelligence, and she's got an intelligence off screen and on screen, and it's just really interesting digging into the characters and how to play this woman who's constantly, through guilt and whatever, self-censoring, censoring her intuition. And then them two, it's weird when you're casting, because it's all sorts of things like coming to mind that people don't think about, like the height of the actors. So I remember when I did Woman in Black, I had Daniel Radcliffe, who's short, and Janet McTeer, who's very tall.
Still the third most complained about film of all time, isn't it? But it's difficult, because then when you're trying to get them in a 2-shot, or it's like weird technical stuff that people don't think of. But so I think I did
I sort of thought, okay, Scoot, there's going to be an interesting kind, because they've got a familiarity, Scoot and Mackenzie. So I thought that'd be interesting in terms of this old couple, you know. And then you have to cast the kids so that they can feel like the kids. And then I think we cast Aisling last and wanted somebody that can slightly, because he's quite, you know, big. I wanted someone that could sort of play against, soften him, I suppose, and be his secret weapon. And Aisling really got that and play the sort of love, you know, kind, loving wife. And I don't know, it's a weird kind of Venn diagram, I suppose, that you kind of go around trying to work out how to.
I think it's far less clear cut than The Fugitive as well. I just think I mean, it's interesting. Danny Boyle did a thing on stage, didn't he? He did a Frankenstein where he inverted the roles.
That's right.
I'd be really fascinated to see how this played out if you inverted it every night. The logistics of that are clearly impossible, but it's interesting. One thing I did want to touch on, I'm sure we're nearly out of time, but I did want to get to this. Just the sheer practicalities of it, because they sent me in advance a load of notes about the film. It said in there, at one stage you were looking to build a farm, and then you decided to shoot on an actual farm. But watching it, those rooms look really small. And just from a nerdy practical point of view, can you take me into like filming there and what you needed to do to make it work?
Well, we were never going to build a farm. It would have been too expensive. We may have built some interiors. And then we found that place and we could shoot interior and exterior. And we had to sort of slightly, you know, move a bit of wall, but very little. It had very low ceilings and
tall actor,
obviously, you know, and it was very higgledy-piggledy, and I was always banging my head because I'm quite tall. But what was good about it is it's like Ken Loach. Ken Loach's thing is, you know, he puts a camera in the corner of a room, and it creates a sort of verite sense because it can only be where it is. And you know, if you're starting to fly away walls and get on long lens and all that sort of stuff, then it creates a different grammar. Whereas this created both for the camera, like as in we're really there, but for performance as well, because for actors, there's something about being on location, you know, and the tactile nature of all the props and the reality and all of that I think creates a deeper reality. You know, actors are brilliant actors. They can do anything. They can do green screen, but they will say themselves that sense of being in the real space, the smell of it, you know, all of it. It just gives them more weapons to play with, I suppose.
For the Ken Loach thing as well, is that why you resist close-ups in the film? Was that a deliberate choice? I presume it's deliberate.
Well, I don't like a close-up unless it's merited. Now, I thought there were times in this where it was definitely merited, and that tended to be when there was some sort of micro-expressional thing going on, or some microaggression or something, where you really think, okay, I need to be in close up to see what he's doing here. But you know, it's something. John won't cut to a close up unless there's a reason for a close up. You know, sometimes, very, very rarely in films, sometimes you have to do it because you've got nowhere to go. But I'm pretty good at shooting the right amount of coverage, so I've always got somewhere to go. You know, sometimes if you have to crunch scenes or something, people bridge things with close ups and whatever. But I don't like doing that. You can, you know, body language tells so much, you know, the space shows so much, and you know, mid shot you can get, you know, particularly when you're making stuff for cinema, the information is there on a big screen, you know. It's like, so I don't know, it's the sort of, you can cheapen the currency of the close-up if you overuse it.
Yeah, I get that completely. We're pretty much out of time. So if I can just sign off with the usual boring, what kind of thing are you up to next? Feel free to give me the exclusive you've not told anyone else at all as well. I'm completely fine with that.
I don't know what I'm doing next. I'm trying to write something at the moment. About halfway through a script. I don't know whether it'll be any good or whether it'll be what I do next. But yeah, I'm that's what's sort of filling my mornings.
Well, our interviews are 14 years apart. So when I speak to you in 2038,
okay,
you know, I'm fascinated to see what you do next. Fascinating. James Watkins, thank you so much for being on this podcast, and thank you for your time.
Cheers. No, I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Take care.
Take care. Nice to see you again.
And that was my conversation with James Watkins. His new film, Speak No Evil, is playing in cinemas now. And that also brings me to the end of this latest episode of Film Stories. As always, thank you so much for listening and thank you for your time. If I've not bored you completely, you can find more from me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Simon Brew. Film Stories is on both of those platforms at Film Stories. We're at facebook.com/filmstoriesonline, youtube.com/filmstories. If you go to store.filmstories.co.uk, that's where you can find all of our print magazines for sale as well. We've got Film Stories and Film Junior print magazines. And filmstories.co.uk is our website, which is updated every weekday with news, features, reviews, TV, movies. It's all clickbait free as well. Really proud of that. And then if you want to financially support what we're doing, if you head to patreon.com/SimonBrew, you get podcasts like this ad free for a start. But that's it. I think I've outstayed my welcome as always. I'm going to start working on the next regular episode of Film Stories, which will be with you soon. Until then, you all take care. You all look after yourselves. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.